All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about managing tenants during COVID. And this is a topic that I get questions from people about because they've run into all sorts of issues. Right? There's tenants that are genuinely in trouble, they've lost their jobs, there's just not much that they can do, but they still need a place to live. Then I've got people that their tenants can absolutely afford to pay, but because of the laws and the moratoriums and things like that, they don't have to pay, or they can find a way around it. And many landlords are panicking and they don't know what to do. And so I want to break down a couple of quick things for you to be aware of as you manage tenants during COVID and some strategies in order to deal with it, okay? So the number one thing to understand is that tenants hold the cards, okay? Maybe you don't like that, maybe you don't agree with it, but what we've seen over time is the government has been making rental property more and more political, and it's gone from things like it's an investment to where rentals are now a basic human right. In other words, shelter is a human right. And the challenge with labeling things a human right, it means that it's then deserved by the people that occupy these places. It's their right to have a place. Now, the challenge for a landlord is that a right for them to take or to use your property in a way that you don't agree with? And I'm not talking now about the cases where people are in significant hardship or have faced some sort of a challenge. I think every landlord, just as human beings, we should try and help each other, okay? There are always times when we have to give a little bit. And I know in managing rentals for 20 years, in all sorts of different places with different types of tenants, there are tenants that genuinely fall on hard times. And just from a pure heart perspective, you want to help them, right? But then I've also had tenants that just want to take advantage. I mean, I had one tenant once who would constantly be late. And this was a property that I owned in Melbourne, Australia. And there was a law at the time that if you were 14 days late, you could file a notice with basically the courts to get them evicted. And what they would do is they would pay on the 13th day. So they were late every month, but they would pay on the 13th day because they knew that as long as they paid within the 14 days, they were fine. So they basically got a free line of credit, so to speak, from me for 13 days or 2 weeks worth of rent that they didn't have to pay. They were just playing the system. And unfortunately for many landlords now, there are all these loopholes that tenants can use. So here's the first thing. Tenants hold all the cards. Whether you like it or not, whether that's fair or not, it doesn't matter. Get over it, okay? Investment property is about money, okay? When it comes down to it, it's not a house that you're buying for yourself to live in. It's a house that you're hoping will bring you a return over time. And so then you have to play the investment game based on the numbers and not based on your feelings. So because the tenants hold all the cards, the biggest mistake that I see landlords do is they try and wave the law in front of their faces or in front of the tenant's face. They try and threaten them with eviction. They try and threaten them with all sorts of things, and it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because, again, they hold the power, and many tenants know they hold the power. So I find that the best way to work with tenants during this time is to get on their side. And there are ways that you can help them to either see that what you're offering them is actually better for them in the long run, or to find ways to give them an incentive to move on, okay? So the first one is cash for keys. And we would do this especially in kind of lower income neighborhoods where we'd have a tenant that would refuse to leave. When we looked at the cost of evicting a tenant and going through that process, depending again where you live, but generally it'd be a 4 to 6 to 8 week process, sometimes longer, to evict a tenant. So that's somewhere between 1 to 2 months worth of rent, plus the cost of the lawyer, plus the cost of the bailiff, everything else that it takes to get a tenant out. And then typically when you've evicted someone, they're not going to leave the place nice. They're going to trash it, or they're going to at least leave all their junk behind. It's going to cost you more money. So when you're looking at it, it may cost you in real terms, 2, 3, 4, 5 months worth of rent in order to get someone out. Well, let's say that 5 months worth of rent is $1,000 a month. Let's just say for simplicity's sake, it's $5,000. Why don't you just offer them $2,000 to leave? Offer them $500 to begin with. See how they go. Offer them $1,000. Offer them $1,500. I mean, it depends on the tenant. You get to know your tenants. You know what they'll go for. Offer to find them another place. Offer to give them a reference, right? Offer to do something that they will feel more comfortable with, right? Offer to have their stuff put in storage that you will pay for 3 months. I know it sounds crazy, but think about it, right? If storage is $150 a month, right? For 3 months, that's $450. You give them another $500, and that's it. For $1,000, you're done. Instead of $5,000. But so many owners get hung up on what they're owed. And yes, they're owed, but it doesn't matter. right? This is the challenge for many people. They just don't understand the difference between what should be and what is, right? So cash for keys is a good one, right? The other one that I really like is there's a lot of programs that the government has that can help tenants in times of need, and not just during COVID, but just in general times. And so if you can find out what these programs are in your state, in your area, and get them connected in, the tenant will see that you're trying to help them. And if you're trying to help them, then they're more likely to want to work with you. But if you just say, hey, you owe me rent, I'm going to evict you, then there's no way to really win that battle, because again, they hold all the power. And then the last one that I really, really like is just go and speak with the tenant. Many landlords are afraid to have a face-to-face with the tenant. And, you know, I don't always advocate this, but if you're, how can I put this? If you're afraid of your tenants, or if you think, well, the property manager is going to deal with it, understand your property manager maybe has 100 or 200 tenants that they're dealing with. They've got problems all over the place. And so the level of care that they're going to have about your particular property is 1 in 200, right? They're not going to spend all the time on your property. So the key is right now to get more involved, to manage that property yourself. You can still have the property manager do everything, but you want to get more involved and just get to know your tenant. Go and talk to them. Maybe bring them some chocolate or something. Say, hey, how are you going during this time? And look for ways that you can work with them. Find out what it is they really need. Sometimes people are just afraid they won't find another property. Help them find another property. Maybe they're looking to relocate. Maybe they're looking for a bigger place, but they're just, they're afraid that during the COVID they can't find it. Or maybe they're afraid that, you're going to evict them. So talk to them about it. Come up with some plans, some ideas. But the point I'm making is engage with your tenant. Don't just say, this is the law and here is what I'm going to do, because ultimately the law in many ways has been suspended at the moment. And even the laws that are there and the laws that are coming into place are there to benefit tenants more than landlords. And so if you change your mindset from one of, how can I fight my tenant, or how can I win against my tenant? The challenge is not to think of it in that way. The challenge is to think of it as a businessman or a businesswoman and say, what is the best outcome that I can get out of this? And how can I help my tenant to help themselves so that I get my property back if they're not paying, or they will start paying, right, if they're not paying right now. And these are things that, are not so much hard to do in practice. The hardest thing for a landlord is to change their mindset, because they've worked hard, they've scrimped, they've saved, they went without in order to buy this investment property, right? They're on the hook for the mortgage, and now they have someone that's sitting in their home and not paying rent. And it just feels so unfair, and I totally get it. Believe me, I get it. I've been through it. But because of that, I just want to tell you that when you get emotional, that's when you lose. And so you really have to see it for what it is, which is, what is the best financial decision that I can make during this time? Change your perspective, and then you can find creative ways to work with your tenant. So I hope this has helped you. See you next time.